So, let's see, Edie, well, let me think about that for a second. David, you can pick that up and then I'll come back to you.
What was the question?
That's the dropping out part. In what way was Edie revolutionary? Or how about this? What was it like to be 20 in 1965? What was it like to be young at that time? What was the sense of exhilaration? Or what was it like to do all the bad things before there was a reason to the price?
Well, what was bad? I mean, what was bad was status quo. I grew up in a world of duck and cover, of fear of the atomic bomb. So by the time I got to college, I'm from upstate New York, and I'd really never been out of upstate New York much. And I went to school in upstate New York, Syracuse University. There was an art school there. I was terrified of New York City, so I went to Syracuse. And you commented earlier about me seeing my first Italian movie, La Dolce Vita. I actually had a buddy in art school. And it's so strange, you meet people along the way and you never realize where your lives are going to converge again. Lou Reed and I were in art school at Syracuse, and we went to see La Dolce Vita together, and I said, I'm out of here. So it was like a catapult. I saw on the screen what I thought was I guess I would call a documentary today. It was a design for living. It was everything the opposite of what life surrounded me represented. So I was desperate to get into that movie, almost like the Purple Rose of Cairo, Woody Allen film, where you walk into the screen. And it's very also another strange thing that John and I just discovered today. We both came to New York City the same month, in July or June or July of '64, both driven by being absorbed into the world that Federico Fellini had created. I saw La Dolce Vita and ran to Rome and wound up actually meeting Fellini and doing the poster and the graphics for 8.5. John saw 8.5, and that's what drew him to New York, and we both converged there at the same time, although we didn't meet personally until 2 or 3 years later. But it was really a sense of catapulting oneself into a dream that you felt was appropriate, and the only thing that was worth living. There was no drive for success. There was no drive for money. There was no drive for celebrity. There was a drive for ecstasy of the moment, of the joy of life, and I can honestly say that when we converged somehow in '67 and started making Chow Manhattan on Easter Sunday of the spring of '67, a month after Time magazine had declared hippie on its cover, we didn't know what hippie was really, but we knew that we were in the center of the universe and we would live forever. Of course, we were wrong, but that's what it felt like.
New York in the '60s, you couldn't set a tripod up on the street for fear of being arrested. So to be an underground filmmaker, one felt that one was in Prague or something, and that you were, engaged in forbidden activities, which of course led us to Andy and 47th Street and the factory, because Andy was, hosting this whole feeling of rebellion in image, where we could all participate in doing things that were ridiculous and absurd and kind of Dada. And so to get a bunch of people who all feel suddenly that the sky's the limit to be able to start doing crazy, ridiculous image with Andy, kind of what got us started.
Well, something you said the other day about, and to go further than when Mayor Lindsay was mayor of New York, it was illegal to shoot. You couldn't shoot anything with a motion picture camera. And there weren't any motion picture cameras. Motion picture cameras were something, the big Mitchells with the cranes with 2 guys on them in Hollywood. There was no camera. There was no video, obviously. And the idea of the Aeroflex had just come into vogue. It was a European camera designed for the German army's use in the Wehrmacht during World War II. But it's just, the idea of shooting a film in New York City was inconceivable. And so then this term underground movies emerged, and it became a joke. The press would laugh at it. It was like, well, what are these underground movies about? And so Andy would, kind of like, oh, I don't know. And he said, there's so much you do in painting. All I have to do is turn on the switch and walk away. No, but it was the idea of being able to make a film was astonishing. There was no possibility of going to Hollywood and blowing up and becoming a star. That's a construction of post '90s. So, does that answer the question?
Which question?
I think it does, actually. It's something that we'll talk a lot about later as we look at some of these other pieces, that one of the things that made the intersection of Andy and Edie so powerful was that she was someone who, as I was saying earlier, really wanted to tell her story, and he was someone who wanted to record someone's life. And the technology was all new. You know, Andy with the audio tapes, a couple years later, when we have Watergate, we have, you know, an artist who starts tape recording every phone conversation. It's, you know, this was Andy. This started with Andy. So you'll see some of the tests of the first video camera tonight, which were done by Andy with Edie. And so there was this sense that there is this technology now that's going to make it possible for us just to live our lives as the art form and to record it somehow. Edie as a revolutionary?
Edie is a revolutionary. Well, Edie did not see herself as needing to validate her existence by virtue of being attached to a man. So she had her own voice, which was unique, and she propelled herself in that to follow her own, what she wanted to say, not by virtue of being with someone else, which ironically, of course, she turns out the perfect partner is Andy Warhol. So that's something to actually think about insofar as her relationship to Andy, because the way he found her and what he thought about her and the way she thought about him in terms of her not having, defining herself through someone, and at the same time, I mean, they were made for each other, ultimately. And then they started to do some really important work.
Let's look at the next clip.